Working Cows Podcast, episode 300. This episode is brought to you by Farming Without the Bank.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the C90 Ocean Minerals Studios. Very excited to bring to you today episode 300 with very special guest Jolene Brown. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about our sponsor today, Farming Without the Bank. None of you are farming like you did 100 years ago. Why are you financing it like you did 100 years ago? The biggest part of your operation is the money that runs through your hands, and you let someone else control that. The bank gets the final say in what you get money for and when you pay it back. For many, this is a great relationship, until it's not. Farming Without the Bank shows you how you can take back control of your money, so you can make the bank plan B instead of plan A. This is done by you creating your own banking system you own and control. To learn more, tune into the Farming Without the Bank podcast and go to farmingwithoutthebank.com to get the book. Once you've read the book, Mary Jo will meet with you one-on-one and help you determine where and how to get started. She will most likely also touch on some estate transition ideas, financing ideas, business growth or startup ideas, and many other things that she has experience with from helping thousands of farmers and ranchers just like you. So check out the Farming Without the Bank podcast, or go to farmingwithoutthebank.com today to get the book. As I said, very excited to be joined today by Jolene Brown. I have wanted to have Jolene on since probably episode 2 of the Working Cows podcast, when Dallas Mount mentioned her and her ideas around the ideas of being a business-first family or a family-first family, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But I'm really excited for this conversation with Jolene. She is a wealth of knowledge on these things, has traveled the world speaking to farmers and ranchers about how to communicate in their business and how to make sure that the people who are part of their business are qualified to take it to the next step. So, Jolene, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows podcast.
I couldn't wait to join you. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Well, really appreciate your work over the years. As I told you in a call before, way back on episode 2 of the Working Cows podcast, Dallas Mount, who now runs the Ranch Management Consultants Company and the Ranching for Profit School, mentioned you as an influence on the way he thinks about these issues of transition and some of those things. And as I've tried to do some research on the way that you like to talk about things, one of the really helpful ways of talking about our roles in agricultural leadership or in agricultural businesses was this kind of paradigm that we move through, this series of roles that we move through of labor, leadership, management, and ownership. So I'd like to just talk about kind of those roles. How do we do them well when we're in those roles? And then how do we prepare to take on the next role that's coming at us so that we are ready to step into them when that time comes?
Well, you've described that well. And the first thing we have to realize is I don't want moms and dads bringing in the kids. I want leader managers hiring worthy employees. And if they're family members, gosh, that's great. But we have to operate as a business, and that's how we truly honor the family. And you hit it right on the head when you talked about a transition hierarchy. So picture a triangle. At the base, everybody needs to start as labor. Scoop, poop, junky equipment, long hours, live in the old house. And man, you'd sure like some help down there, but everybody needs to start as labor. And when you labor well, you get to manage. Maybe you're good at herd health or agronomy or nutrition. Maybe you're good at marketing or mechanics, but whatever you're good at, we're going to put you in charge of that. And I will tell you right now, I will put the next generation in charge of technology, period. Because if I can't fix it with duct tape and a hammer and baling wire, I'm in trouble, okay? But whatever you are good at, I'm going to have you manage that. Now, as a manager, you've got some responsibilities. You have to make sure there's a common goal for that. You got to make sure there's money to do the job, that you've got the right equipment and the right people. And you actually have to report to the owners and have, make sure we're all pulling on the same page. So management isn't just, I do a job well and I'm in charge. That also has a whole series of responsibilities. But, if you manage that part of the business well, gosh, now you can manage this and you learned how to do that. And pretty soon your management skills grow and you get to lead. But I always have to remind the senior generation that at the pinnacle of their career, they get to become labor again. We kind of forgot that one, didn't we? But you see, you've worked so hard and you've said to somebody, follow me, labor, labor, labor. Whoa, that's a good idea, management. And now you do this, and now I get to follow you. And yet I had a fellow at a Farm Bureau annual meeting say to me, Jolene, I think my kids just want me out of here. I don't even think they'd even mind if I'm dead. And I looked at his name tag and I said, oh, I don't believe that's true, because I work a lot in your state with the young farmers and ranchers. And 2 of your adult children have been on that committee, and I've gotten to know them. Dad, they don't want you dead. What they want is the wise master, somebody who's ridden the roller coaster through that whole triangle when there's droughts and when there's blizzards and when there's no money and when you hope there's going to be money and when a disease comes through or a political issue stops you down. We've got to have somebody who has what I call grit. And you've got that, senior generation. You've got the grit. And we need you. And probably as a wise master and mentor, one of the most important questions you're going to ask the next generations as they move up is this: how are you going to mitigate your risk? Here, have you talked about this advisor? That one might help you think that through a little bit more. Because when you picture that triangle, labor, management, leadership, and labor again, the rising generation must learn how to lead. The senior generation must learn how to leave. And there's a big difference between the two of that. And what I find, there are some things that you can do to help those of the senior generation move along.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So you would say then that leadership or management comes before leadership, that we are going to be entrusting, like you said, the young people with the technology, if that's what they're good at, or whatever you're good at, we're going to entrust you with management of this. And then over time, some more leadership in other areas might come along with that. But first, we're gonna give you an opportunity to have some management control over this sector of our business.
Well, I have prerequisites before you invite a family member into the business. And one of them is, what do you bring? And does the business even need it? And will your cost to the business equal the value that you bring? So you're bringing something. And since one of my prerequisites is you've worked for someone else, not a family member, for 2 or 3 consecutive years, and you've had good evaluations or promotion, that's all part of the prerequisites before you come into the business. So since one of them was, what do you bring? That's where you start in your management. And when I see that you manage that well, you don't exclude me, you communicate, you ask questions, you learn, you admit your mistakes. And now you also are going to manage this. And then you went for farming for ranching profit school and you learned that. And so you're going to be in charge of that. And now I want you to plan our annual meeting. This is all management. And all of a sudden you put those pieces together and you're leading the business. You're doing the heavyweight work of the business, not just what we would call the labor.
Yeah. And so would you say that people who come back after those 2 or 3 years away working for somebody else, are they starting in a management position and they've done the labor when they were younger? Where's the labor? The labor belongs to everybody. How would you say that those play out?
Well, I got to tell you something that really bugs me. When I'm talking to somebody and I say, so how long have you been ranching or how long have you been farming? Oh, since I was 4 years old. I was following daddy around. I was riding my horse. I was doing this and branding. I did this. And, I always went to the feed store with him. You see, this is all your education for 18 years, but we're not done. Because one of the prerequisites before you come back into the business is you have an education of at least 2, preferably 4 years that will benefit the business. So if you have worked for somebody else, and now you don't have to start at the very bottom rung, but we all have to do work, okay? At the very bottom rung, because you have learned something and our business needs it or we wouldn't have hired you. So yes, you start at perhaps a different level And you learn so much by working for other people. One of them is that there's more than one way to do things. You learn that respect is earned. It's not genetic, because respect requires consistent behavior. And I can't treat you nice and celebrate you this week and cuss and swear at you tomorrow and want me to be respected. So you learn you get paid. Isn't that something? When you work for somebody else, you learn you actually get a vacation. When you work for someone else, you learn how to work with people you don't even like. And that it is not just your job, it is our job that works together to get things done. So you learn to help other people succeed in what they do. But one of the most important things you learn is you must be hired and you can be fired. At the same time, you learn you're going to be held accountable. But I do so many wonderful rising generation events where we've got young and beginning, young farmers or ranchers. And I hear this time and time again. Jolene, I can't do anything right, but I don't even know what I'm supposed to do, but I can't do it right. Well, that's because they don't know their job. And here, when they worked for somebody else, they knew what their job was. So this goes back to make sure that you've got the right leader who understands they are in the people business. We are so good at production. We're so good at weeds and seeds and feeds and breeds and money, machinery, and marketing, but we're crappy with people. Mm-hmm. And it's the people that do all that production. So we have to make sure we have the leader understanding that they have the education, the experience, the character, and personality to actually lead. And when you lead, you learn how to replace yourself. That is your number one job as a leader. So this is why the management expertise of different areas grow and grow and grow. And then you put those together and then you're leading the business. And now I work for you.
I think that one of the things that is important is learning to be intentional. And what I mean by that is learning to know where I'm at in my business and know what I need to learn to be better at this stage, but then also at the next stage. And so that labor portion, it sounds like, is, yes, when we're younger, before we go to college, we're part of the labor team on some level, maybe on weekends, maybe during the summers. Then we go to college, we get a job for a couple of years after college with somebody else, and we're a laborer there as well.
Or a manager, depending what you bring,
right.
What they hired you for.
I see. Mm-hmm. Sure. And so what, I'm just wondering, what are some of the invaluable lessons that will prepare you for the next stage when you are a laborer? What should we be focusing on learning as a laborer so that we're ready? And I think you've touched on some of those things. You can be hired and you can be fired. So maybe we've covered that. But what would you say are some of the things that we should be focusing on as a laborer to prepare us to be a manager?
Okay. So if we're talking farming and ranching, understand everybody is labor as well.
Right.
I've never met a leader on the ranch that doesn't go out and work and do nighttime hours and coach other people, praise them and support them or correct them and fire them. So labor is just not, you do this for 4 years, check, I'm done. Labor is, I don't care what leaders do. They got to be out there doing the work too. And of course, they are modeling, they're teaching, they're assessing, they're praising, they're promoting. So everybody, when I say has labor, you start there. But that doesn't mean just because you moved up, you don't have to do the work. Mm-hmm. The difference between management and the labor is you got to make sure the work's done. Okay, so you got to have enough people doing the labor. And it might be you. You might be the same person. So the lessons that you learn, yes, you must be hired and you can be fired. You might learn that maybe things aren't so bad at home. Maybe you're darn lucky to have the opportunity to do what you want to do in an environment where perhaps you grew up in, that you understand the history of it. But you also understand that if you come back home to the business and they treat you like crap, you don't have to stay there. You've learned you can do something else and work for other people or work on your own sort of place. I have so many of the rising generation who are forming the peer groups. They are working with peers rather than parents. They're working with friends rather than family. So again, that doesn't negate the triangle people go through in a business. It just means you learn so many things. As I said before, you learn you get paid. And I'll have to tell you, and we'll talk about this some more later, but farmers and ranchers lie. They do. They say things like, work hard, someday this will all be yours. In other words, we're not going to pay you now. You'll get your reward when I'm gone. They say, I'm going to retire. Or they say, oh, don't worry about your brothers and sisters. They've got their jobs. They're not interested in the business. Now that's true until you're dead. Then everybody's very interested in the assets of the business. So you quickly learn in a business that a conversation is not a contract. And if it's not in writing, it does not exist. Classic example. I had a farmer who had worked a long time with dad and mom in the business. Mom had died, dad's still living, work hard, someday this will all be yours. And Don and Judy took really good care of dad. He lived on the home place. They had him to their house for a home cooked meal every single day. They personally paid for groceries so he could have easy fixins for the rest of the time. They took him to the senior citizen center and bingo and church. They took him to all the funerals of his friends. And when the school bus stopped, it stopped at Grandpa's house. And the 4 kids clambered out the bus, ran up the steps, gave Grandpa a hug, told him about the day, cheered him up. And then mom or dad would come and pick up their kids, bring them back home to do their chores and their homework. Dad said to them time and time again, I don't know how you do this. You've got 4 kids. You're running all around the country. They're in 4-H and they're in band. One plays football, one plays volleyball. They got all this drama stuff. They're going to go to the play. And then you work so hard on this ranch. You know, man, the weather's been tough. Calving was hard this year, wasn't it? And feed, we didn't have much last year because it was a drought during the summer. And then I don't know how you do this. And then you take such good care of me. You know, someday this will all be yours. And he said that time and time again. Then dad dies. At the reading of dad's will is Don and Judy and Don's 2 sisters. And Don had dad had a phrase in his will that drives me nuts. It's called equal shares per stirpes. I divide my estate equally between my children. If one of them is deceased, that portion goes to the grandchildren by bloodline only. And the 2 sisters went, whoa, we weren't expecting this. I mean, wow, that's quite a gift. How long have you been working here with that? 42 years. My gosh. You built quite a business. Yeah. We'll take our cash yesterday. There's no way that Don and Judy could come up with 2/3 of the appraised cash value. There was no buy-sell. There was no contract for deed. They knew they were done that day, but I'm not done. As Don, that hardworking son, walked out of the attorney's office, on the steps of that attorney's office, Don had a heart attack. And my phone rang. That's a conversation. So wills are changed on a whim. You know, as long as somebody has sound mind, they can do whatever they want to with it. So don't count on just because it's in the will, it's going to be that way. This is why I require, when I work with family businesses, that things are clarified and in writing, because if it is not in writing, it doesn't exist. And then we must have transparency so other people know what the plans are. They must know the rules of the game. They don't have to like it, but they deserve to know it. So if you're going to divide things equally, tell me now. So I don't keep investing into 2/3 of their net worth. Tell me now so that I can build and create security for my family. And, you know, there's a thing we got to realize about inheritance. Don't count on it. And if you get it, isn't that a wonderful gift?
Yeah.
Now, if you want to assure that gift before you die, which I would like to do, and you keep operations separate from the land, because I want 100% of operations to be owned by those who know how to operate the business. I don't want people owning it equally and they know nothing about the business and they can outvote me and I'm the one who knows the business. And then we tied it together with the land portion. So it's 2 separate entities. And then there are ways to do that so that we can continue the business, if that's what you want.
Yeah, very, very good. Very practical. I think that separating the business and the land is such a huge piece of this, and doing it well. And I really appreciate that. And you know, sharing what's at stake. You know, so. I guess before we make the transition, because I think that's a great transition into what I'd like to talk about next. But before we make that transition, let's talk just a little bit more about this triangle: labor, leadership, and management. And
management before leadership,
right?
Labor, management, leadership, and then ownership.
Right. And so, where does ownership fit into that? How do we start to transition that ownership over, and how do we pick those candidates and some of those things?
Yeah. So. There's 3 questions the existing owners must answer, or I won't work with them. They have to tell me, do you really want this business to continue? And I want a yes or a no. I don't want to, well, we'll see, or I don't know how to do this, or what do we, I just want to, is there the fire in your belly that you want this business to continue? And then when are you going to transition it? Not just the labor or the management. When are you going to transition the ownership? Is it during your lifetime that you have created a structure such as a corporation, an LLC, an FLP? So transitionally, increments can be transitioned, whether they be for earned sweat equity. We can talk about that later. Whether it be as a gift, whether it be that they buy it. Incrementally, you can do that and build up equity ownership in a business. And so we have to make sure that we get that done as well. And I forgot the question. What were you asking me?
Where does ownership fit into that?
Ownership fit in.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're starting to buy in because you've got to have structures to do that. It's really hard to say, would you survey off that section of land and I want to buy that one, and yet try to keep the ranch together. So we have that. And again, I want the rising generation to work extremely hard, that 100% of ownership is in their name at the time the existing owners have moved along. So whether it's purchasing or buying, or whether it's a contract for deed, and most importantly, if you're an entity like an LLC or corp, you have a buy-sell agreement. Sole proprietors can't have that, and that's a problem. But an entity does. And in a buy-sell agreement, it is who has the option to buy. So you might say those who currently are owners in the business in the same proportion. You might say, I'm going to bring in somebody new. You might say anybody in the family can own, or you might say can go on the auction block and they can own. So who has the option to own? And in what order? I like to start with those who are in the business and know the business. And then the next group has an option to buy. How will the assets be appraised? If you have what's called a closed structure, in other words, you said only family members can be in this corporation, or only names of people can be in this corporation, that's called a closed entity. It can't be sold to somebody else. And because of that, the appraised value gets a reduction, okay, because it's a closed entity. And it can be up to 40% of the appraised value. How can they be appraised? You might say for agricultural use only. Now, understand if they find an endangered species there, or we've got to work with that one. Or if you're butted up to something that's going to be a housing development, you've got to have accurate appraisal. But again, if it's a closed entity, it can be a reduced value. So who has the option to buy, and in what order? How will the assets be appraised? Here's the big one, but what are the terms? What I find kills so many businesses is cash on demand. You want out? This is the money I want for it. Give it to me today. So buy-sells are triggered by what I call the deadly Ds: death, disability, divorce, disaster, drugs. There's all kinds of deadly Ds. They each have terms, because you cannot, in my opinion, hold an owner hostage. You can't say, nope, we're not, you can never get your money out. You can never buy out. But if you want out, that's called disillusionment. It might be a 10-year buyout under the family interest rate set every year by the government. If it's a divorce, it's going to be an immediate exit, because I don't want an ex-spouse sitting at the table. But if the judge says half the assets you've acquired while you are married, the value of it is half his and half hers, then whoever is in that corporation married to them, half of that value of stock or membership in the LLC the value might belong to the spouse. So we have said to our daughters, whoever you have married to, if they don't sign the buy-sell agreement, no assets would come your way. Because then if there is divorce, they would get their buyout under the terms. And it is our daughters who would have to buy them out. If they can't afford to pay that with those terms, they have to sell back their shares of stock to those of us in the business to get the money to pay. I'm not paying for somebody's divorce. So what I'm saying is each deadly D, and that's usually about 8 pages of buy-sell agreement. It is so, so very important. So an example, I was working in South Carolina in the poultry industry, and one of the sons of the business had been there for 9 years, and he just got married. He married somebody who can't stand the smell of chickens. Now, this is a problem. So he's decided they're going to move, and he wants cash for his portion of ownership today. But in the buy-sell agreement, that's called disillusionment. I don't want to work here anymore. I want out. And it's a 7-year buyout. So you don't bring down the business while you buy them out. And sometimes the first option to buy somebody out is the business buys them out because they might have the collateral to do so. And then it becomes non-voting shares or non-voting portions of the members of an LLC. So there's many, many ways to do this, but a buy-sell agreement is key. And I always encourage, and I play out saying, plain speaking, if you ever go to an attorney and they helped you develop a structure like a partnership, an FLP, an LLC, a C or an S Corp, or anytime there is commingled entities, it's a unit and you own a portion of it. Anytime you've gone to an attorney and they help you develop that entity, the same day you sign those papers, if you don't sign a separate agreement called the buy, sell, or exit strategy agreement, you take that attorney and hang them up by the balls or boobs. I don't care what sex they are, because they did you a disservice, right? And my phone's going to ring. Yeah. So we have got to have a buy, sell agreement is if we need to dissolve this entity, how do we do it? If somebody wants out or is out because of death or disability, how will they get their portion? The terms are critical. Cash on demand, as the two sisters did, brings down the business immediately.
Let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsor again today, Farming Without the Bank. None of you are farming like you did 100 years ago. Why are you financing it like you did 100 years ago? The biggest part of your operation is the money that runs through your hands, and you let someone else control that. The bank gets the final say in what you get money for and when you pay it back. For many, this is a great relationship until it's not. Farming Without the Bank shows you how you can take back control of your money so you can make the bank plan B instead of plan A. This is done by you creating your own banking system you own and control. To learn more, tune into the Farming Without the Bank podcast and go to farmingwithoutthebank.com to get the book. Once you've read the book, Mary Jo will meet with you one-on-one and help you determine where and how to get started. She will most likely also touch on some estate transition ideas, financing ideas, business growth or startup ideas, and many other things that she has experience with from helping thousands of farmers and ranchers just like you. So check out the Farming Without the Bank podcast or go to farmingwithoutthebank.com today to get the book. So you said that the place you start is with asking the question, do you want this business to continue?
Yep. Then there's two more. The next question is, when are you going to transition it? Is it during your lifetime while you have vetted somebody, they're working alongside, you let them buy in, you transition as sweat equity because they've earned it, but you're not paying them cash? And then the third question is, to whom are you going to transition? I have people transition at the reading of the will. Surprise. So I'm working with 4 family members. They're in their 60s. Mom still owns everything. She's in the nursing home. She owns 3,000 acres. They hope there's a will. They hope it can continue. And they said to me, would you go and talk to Mom in the nursing home? And I said, does Mom want to talk to me? And they said, she does, because she knows you're working with us. Would you go talk? I said, I'll go talk to Mom. Oh, what a great visit we had. I mean, what a life journey she's had. And then she said to me, Jolene, about my will, I'm not going to tell my kids what's in my will because right now they all come to see me. Yikes. So I said to her, if you carry out what you told me, the kids aren't going to speak to each other again and the business will have to be sold. If that's what you want, that's what's going to happen right now. If you are of sound mind and you choose to make some other choices, there are other ways you might do this. And I said to her, I am not, nor would I ethically go back and tell your children what is in your will. But I am going to tell them, and I did, I don't like plan A, so each of you better have a plan B.
Yeah, very important. And so that first question, is that because the first question of, do you want this business to continue? Is that because a lot of times the people that you end up working with, their back is against the wall already and they're kind of painted into a corner and they are thinking maybe it's just time to throw our hands up? Is that why that's the first question?
Well, they've got the power. They own the assets.
Sure.
I work with good businesses who want to be even better. I work with family businesses who don't want to make the same mistakes because they saw what happened at the neighboring ranch. I work with people who are scared and fearful. I also work with people who didn't inherit anything till they were 60. And by golly, I need to keep it for a while because I finally got it. And so I had an 80-year-old man say to me, Jolene, someday I ought to be turning stuff over to my boy. I said, your boy's 60, you screwed him. We're talking grandkids here, right? But I have to know, do they want the business to continue? Do they want the ranch to continue or the farm to continue? Do they want a legacy of the land to continue? Do they want a legacy of values of the land and the people on the land to continue? Just tell me, because then how you do this actually becomes quite easy. There are extremely good attorneys, accountants, and financial planners that will help you with different ways you can do this. And I often have to say to a senior generation, I'm so sorry that happened to you. You didn't cause it. You can't control it, but please don't do the same thing to your kids.
And it fits into a paradigm that I think is pretty helpful of mission. Do you want the business to continue? Vision. Who do you want to take over next? And then timeline, by when. Those things all seem to fit pretty well into that paradigm. And I think that's a really helpful outline.
Yeah, there are three things that you have to transition. The first is the education. What do you need to know to do this job? This is how much I know. This is what, you have to transfer the education. And they've learned something. They've been to school and they've learned something. They work for somebody else. So they have an education. Second, you have to transition the experience, how you do the job. How do we currently do it? Meaning that's not the only way to do it. And that doesn't mean there's not a better way to do it. But the experience that I've had, the grit that I've formed, the roller coaster that I've ridden. So you educate, you share the experience. And then the third is you transition the hard assets. But here's the problem, Clay. Everybody wants to start with number 3. Who gets the land? Who gets the critters? Who owns this? Was there any IRAs? Is there any other event? Everybody wants to start with that. I have to make sure they have a business worthy of transitioning. And that means you have operated as a business first family, not a family first business. And yet 95% or more of every operation that calls me, emails me, I've got 4 calls right now already today. They're operating as a family first. Now, let's not rock the boat. Oh, we don't want to get Dad mad. Gosh, I think there's a will. I hope we can continue to ranch. We just all get along. We love each other. We'll be fine. And they're operating their future on a habit, assumption, a hope, and a tradition. And sometimes that works out. I call that lucky. But you cannot count on the business for good productivity, profitability, peace of mind. And you cannot count on sitting together happily at a holiday table. You will not have good decision making. If you want to operate as a family first, that is okay with me if it can be a hobby. Now, what I teach and the template tools they receive when I do my workshops and my presenting on this topic, I teach them how to become a business first family. Now, that does not demean the family. It does not say the business is more important than the family, but what it says is we love and honor you, this family, so very much. We better get the business right. Because if not, at the end of the day, they may lose both family and business. And one of my speeches is stop the fighting on the way to the funeral home. There's things you better do when the times are good so that they can grieve and celebrate a life and a legacy. And a legacy isn't what you leave behind. A legacy is what you do while you're alive. You're building it to transition it. And if you have a rising generation who has the education, the experience, the character, the personality, the fire in the belly, starting out as labor, working up the triangle, then you have done well, because the number one job of a leader is to replace him or herself.
I think it's important, to start with the end in mind, to, what do we hope happens? What do we want to be true at the end of this process? And, because then if, like you said to the lady in the nursing home, if that's what you want, that's fine. It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it, but your kids aren't going to talk to each other and the business will have to be sold. Start with the end in mind. What do you want to be true when we're done? Now let's build something that can match that. Is that kind of how you approach it?
Yes. And hope's not a good business strategy. I want things clarified and in writing.
Right.
And so I want everything from the mission statement to how you're going to deal with conflict. I want a code of conduct because different generations think and act differently. I want to know who's going to hire, who's going to fire. I want to know the structure of the business and current ownership. I want to know the intent of the owners to transition. Is it not until somebody dies, somebody might have an opportunity, or is it go on the auction block? Just tell me the rules of the game. Well, there's so many tools, but there's two that are really important. And the first one is I want them to have a business overview, a one-page outline of everything they do, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And it's called a business overview. And it simply is an outline. There are so many uses once you can describe your business on one page. And one of the uses is then you're going to take a spreadsheet like Excel, and the long vertical column are the headings from your outline, all the way from meetings and communications and insurance to animals to nutrition to feedlot to marketing to machine. Everything is in the outline. But then across the horizontal column are the people in the business. And then you assign letters. So who gets the R, the responsibility? The buck stops with you. You got to make sure the work is done. I didn't say you work alone, but you got to make sure the work is done. Who reports to owners? Who understands the money? Who makes sure we've discussed a goal and we're on the same page for that to support it? Who has the R? And I only want one R in a line. Then who does the W? Who does the work? Probably you and many others. So there might be many W's across the page. Who do you have to consult with before you do it? Well, it might be your banker or ag lender. It might be the existing owners. And who do you keep informed? It might be the in-laws. It might be the community. Who, and this now becomes your job description in a chart form. Then I can tell whether or not a transition is really happening. Because when I first get there, and the outline does not take long to do, because I've worked in so many types of agriculture, the outline doesn't take long to do. And then I will say to them, I put this on a spreadsheet. Each of you take a copy and just fill in the R's and bring it back to me. It takes him a little bit, but Dad is always first. John does this, Patty does that, Susan does that, Paul does it. He's got the R's all across the page. I get back everybody else's, and there's a pattern. It goes, Dad, R, 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 R. I said, hey, Dad, you told me you want the business to continue, right? Yep. Well, then every year I need to see these R's transitioning. And yes, they have to consult with you because it's your asset that are supporting this. But every year I want the R's to transition. And I always say, if you have worked hard in the business and you've been kind and courteous and respectful, and you've not just meet the expectation, you've exceeded it, and you don't have an R in your line after 6 years, run, go, get out of here. As you are what I'm going to call a lifetime employee. Now, I have met people that just want to be a lifetime employee, and that's no problem. But understand your salary is set by the value you bring. So the value that the R's and the W's sit. We don't pay everybody the same thing in a family business when you've got one who works hard and one who hardly works. Oh, but we got to pay our kids the same. Well, we didn't hire kids, we hired employees. Okay. And so this has so many, it has about 7 or 8 uses. And one of the other uses of the outline of the business is that you're going to laminate it and you're going to put it out in the shop or out in the barn. And when somebody needs to discuss something, they simply circle it. I encourage people to have monthly management meetings. Nothing circled, don't meet. And when you meet, you can only discuss the things that are circled. This meeting is not more than an hour, and we have to get to the agenda, get to the topic. Now, that's something really important, like we're going to change an order of our business or going to bring some, that may require a separate meeting. But I want these management meetings, so this is important. Just as during the busiest time of year, and on our farm in Iowa, that's planting and harvest or calving, okay? That's when you need this type of meeting. It's called a morning huddle. You're either checking in on your iPhone or your iPad, or you're there in person at 7 o'clock out in the shop, okay? Here's what the morning huddle is. Here's what we're going to do today. Here's who's going to do it. Do you have what you need to do it? Now let's get out there and get to work. See, on our farm, we're not flat. We have a lot of rolling hills, and my husband can take that combine and hide behind a hill. Did you know that? And I'm supposed to find him, right? and yet I'm bringing the rig to bring in the grain to haul in. And so, yeah, we got all ways to communicate, but my husband likes to communicate with hand signals. Drives me crazy. So the bottom line here is that this chart lets me know whether or not a transition is really happening. And you really did want the business to continue, because if you say yes, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. Let's work on the transitioning. Who is worthy of the R? who's worked hard in labor and managed it well, can take care of that right now. Let's get the R over there. And here's what's going to happen. You might now be in charge of the herd health. That might be your overall. Now, there's many people working in that, but you're the one in charge. And wouldn't you know, dad or mom comes around and they're going to tell you, no, you didn't do this right. And you have to say to them, did you want the R back? Because if you want it back, you can have it back. But obviously, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing. Would you teach me what I'm screwing up on? Would you help me do it better? And that's how you become the student. They are still the teacher, but they're acknowledged that you are now the manager.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a redefinition of the word responsibility, or maybe part of what you are doing is helping people redefine the word responsibility, because dad has one definition and everybody's got their responsibilities. But then when you ask the kids, no, it's all dad. It sounded like circus seals. R. It's just R's all the way down, and they're all dads, nobody else's. And so you've got to help the team redefine what do we mean by responsibility, that the buck stops with you, you make the decision, and we're going to hold you accountable. And so I think that's a really important piece of that conversation.
I had a next generation in charge of a feedlot, and she was doing a tremendous job. She had to learn a lot. And she consulted a lot with people who had done it before her. And she had an advisor to help it doing. And all of a sudden, dad says, you're not capable of doing this. You're not doing anything right. And she said, did you want the R back? Do you need the control of this? Do you need me to work for you again? And he stopped in his tracks. And she said, obviously, I'm doing something wrong. Would you teach me what I need to do different? I probably screwed up. I probably cost us money. I don't want to do it again. So would you help me?
Yeah, I think that's another big piece of this, and that's kind of where I'd like to wrap up, is on this idea of commonalities of successful transitions. You've seen a lot of them, and we've talked about some of these things, some of these tools that you've talked about. But I think that communication piece and being willing to just not hide it, not stuff it down inside, and not just power through and move on and not talk about it, but to own it and say, Dad, I know I messed up. And I probably cost us some money, but help me learn so that next time we're not back here in 6 months having this same conversation. Those real conversations about really debriefing the situation and making sure that we don't repeat it if it was a failure, and that we do repeat it if it was a success. And I think that those real conversations are a big part of it. But what are some of the other commonalities of successful transitions that you see?
They learn that communication is the bloodstream of the business. And I am just like everybody listening to this podcast. The more I have to communicate with people, the more I like cows. Because I don't like that, Obidi, I'm going to send her to market. I cannot do that with grandpa or mom or dad or sisters or brothers. And so we need some help with communication. Now, this is why I want the morning huddles. I want the monthly management meeting. And if you're a structure, you darn well better be having that annual meeting, or else your liability insurance is not valid. We could get into that one. But if you're not acting as the entity, and all of a sudden you have an injury on the ranch and you go to the insurance company and they say, are we covered? And they say, show me the minutes to your annual meeting. What annual meeting? You see, if you don't, they insure the corporation, they don't insure individuals. And here you are acting like individuals. So they learn that communication is the bloodstream of the business. They also learn that a conversation is not a contract. And they work extremely hard to be courteous and respectful, to find out what are the rules of the game. And that if it's not in writing, it does not exist. And these good businesses who are in 5 and 6 generations have made sure that things are clarified and in writing and then communicated. There's transparency. The other thing is that they've made an intentional decision. We're going to operate this as a business, and that's how we honor the family. So as I work with people, I bring 4 tools. I bring a mirror, a box of tissues, a roll of duct tape, and a 2x4. I got them all on the table. And I bring the mirror because most of them invite me so I will fix somebody else. Dad would give up control. Mom would say what's on her mind. If those kids just had a work ethic, well, if he hadn't married her, we'd be okay. Fix them and we'll be fine. I have to start with the people who are there. And here's the big one. I got to start with where we're at today. Sometimes what's happened in the past is not pretty. It's not fair, but it is what it is. How do you count what's left, not what you lost? You can't live in the past, but boy, did we learn lessons. So I bring the mirror, and then I bring the tissues because there's always emotion. There's anger or worry. There's fear. There's tears. And you've taught me that when emotion and logic collide, emotion wins. So I got to deal with the emotion so we can get through the details. So mom's getting upset at the table. This is hard. Okay. We're talking about this stuff. And I just gave her the tissue box and I said, Mom, you just go ahead and cry it out. I know it's hard, but when you're done crying, then we'll talk about it. In other words, I didn't excuse it. I acknowledged the emotion. And I bring the duct tape, not just so they'll listen, but metaphorically, sometimes I have to tape them to their chair. There's going to be somebody says, by golly, this is how it's going to be. You want to stand up and walk out the door. Or somebody else that says, oh, this is getting hard. I'm going to go get some coffee and cookies. I'll come back in a little bit. Nope, you got to be present. And then there's the 2x4, because friends, sometimes there's no other way. You just got to let them have it. Here's a classic example. I've been at over 400 kitchen tables, and they kind of taught me what works and what doesn't. Okay. So mom and dad had transitioned by contract the business to the next generation. He's on all kinds of boards. He's gone a lot. Mom has a travel agency. She's gone. So by contract, they sold it to the next generation. The kids aren't paying them. And the first thing I said was, is this a legal contract? And they said, yes. And I said, well, then you have to take them to court. Oh, but there are kids. Well, then it's a gift. Oh, no, we need the money. Well, I don't have any other option. But then I turned to the adult kids and I said, why aren't you honoring this contract? This is your signature at the bottom. Tell me why you're not paying this amount. And they said, well, Jolene, we're going to get it all anyway. Why should we have to pay for it? 2x4 moment, right? Let them have it, right? And I said to mom and dad, this is what I call entitlement. If I were you, I'd write them out of the will today. They can earn their right to come back in, but nobody is entitled to an inheritance.
Yeah.
So when we go through those things, we learn that money matters, and you've got to make sure the senior generation is financially secure, or they will never relinquish control. They must work with a certified financial planner, probably the most underutilized and one of the most needed advisors that we have for us to use. But this is the person who will say, what do you own? What do you owe? Do you have any other investments? Let's find out Social Security. Let's take a look at, is your house secure? So you got a roof over your head and health insurance for what you need to do. They're the ones who look at, see if you have long-term health care. And if not, you're going to bring down the business. So they're going to figure out, are you going to self-insure? Well, then if all of this is true, now we've got the facts about money. You have to understand that people have to live until they die. How are they going to live? What are they going to live on? So I'm not a money person, but I serve in all these advisory councils of family businesses with the attorneys, accountants, and financial planners. And this is what I hear. At the time of which you are transitioning, or you have completely transitioned, this is how much money you need to live. This is how much money you're going to get. This is what you still need from the business that needs to pay you. And if you don't have that, you never transition an asset. It has to be kept in your own name because you're going to need that for your care. You want to transition what the next generation can afford to grow or can afford to lose. But you financially are secure first. And we've all heard this. I was born on the ranch. I want to die on the ranch. I'm going to die with my boots on. I'm going to die while I'm out there combining. I'm going to go round and round in the field, dig my own grave. By the way, that was an exact quote from my husband. So if you're going to transition, we've got to take care of the money because money really matters. And please understand that when you pay people, it comes out of the cash flow, not the net worth.
Mm-hmm.
And so money truly matters. Then let's get things in writing. But one of the key things here, Clay, is we're going to do all this work. And it's not a dreaded process, but it's something that can bring you great joy, peace of mind, help you have a good holiday table celebration. It can assure the business can continue. And we've honored the non-ranching or non-farming heirs as well. When you do this right, then the last thing we've got to have our families do is celebrate. We need to pause to applaud all that we have done. You and I work so very hard on and in the business. We're round and round like a hamster on the wheel. We run round and round. We get burnt out, worn out, stressed out. And then we say to the next generation, oh, come on the wheel so you can get burnt out, worn out, stressed out too. What would happen if we actually pause to applaud all that we have did? When are you going to celebrate? The great legacy businesses that I have worked with and had the privilege to watch them work through hard transitions and great results is they always pause to applaud. So at our farm, After harvest, we say to the kids, how do you want to celebrate? The last calf is dropped. How are we going to celebrate? When are you going to pause to applaud? And when you do this, you're helping marriages, you're helping families, the foundation of the people who have earned the right to continue your business.
Jolene, very, very good stuff today. Last question. We'll just kind of wrap up with this. You said when you're having a conversation with an 80-year-old and he's talking about his 60-year-old son, and you tell him, "Well, you screwed him already. We're talking about the grandkids." Can you tell us or tell me a little bit about your ideal timeline? What are some of the things that you like to see in place? By when? What age for each generation? And some of those things.
There's no specific age on this. And understand, you never kick a farmer or rancher off the farm or ranch. That is their soul. But they don't get to determine what jobs they can safely do. When I had a 90-year-old man who still thought he should be hauling in grain and almost hit a school bus because he didn't think he had to stop at a stop sign. It takes too much to start all over again if you come to a complete stop. Well, all the keys come out of the equipment. But what is it that dad can still do? How can we encourage them? How can we help them find their spirit of giving to others? So there's no specific age here. But as I've said, if you have come back to the business and you have been invited, just because you want to doesn't mean you get to. You've got to meet all 6 requirements. By the way, the last 2 requirements are you still living at home and is your mother doing your laundry? I've got to have people who are emotionally ready, have some intelligence, as well as is intellectually ready too. So when they meet the requirements, if after 6 years they don't have an R in their name, run. Or understand you're a lifetime employee, or approach the leader managers who have the R's. But you see, once this is clarified and in writing and they see this chart, the senior generation goes, oh, heck, I guess I'm not. And so I like to see that transition, but you have to earn the right for it. You have to earn the right for managing areas. You have to earn the right because you're reporting back to owners and being respectful about that. You earn the right. And so I see a lot of people in their 30s who say to me, I'm ready to take over the business. And I say, sometimes it falls on you. You have no choice. The senior generation's dead. Get some advisors quick. But what I say to them, show me your grit. And one of the challenges that we have had is the senior generation has made it way too easy for the next generation because we didn't want them to fail. But the enemy of grit is ease. And when you're in school systems where everybody gets the trophy, everybody is the winner, when they are told everything is, everybody's happy, good, lucky, everything should be good because you are who you are. Well, there's the other side to that. You get to earn the right for those types of opinions as well. And I want them to march up. So I have a lot of early 40-year-olds who are leading the business. I have families where we have no internal leader, because they're cousins working together, and each cousin is very good at something, but they're not going to report to that person. You can't evaluate me. And so they bring in their advisory council to help lead their business, or we bring in a non-family member to lead the business. So there's not a specific age, but there is a demonstration of your experience, your education, your character and personality that is telling me and you and everybody else in the business we're ready for the next step.
Very good. Jolene, so much value here today. I really appreciate it. Where could we send people? Show notes page for today is workingcows.net/300. Workingcows.net/300 is the show notes page for today. So where could we send people if they want to get in touch with you about having you speak at an event or working with you with their family?
First of all, 300 is quite a number. Congratulations to you on the community that you have helped to grow and what we have learned from each other and the gift giving that you do by this podcast. So 300 is quite a number. Congratulations. And they can contact me at jolenebrown.com, Jolene Brown.com. If you Google Jolene Brown, you either get me or a pole dancer. Okay. But if you put Jolene Brown speaker, you'll get me.
Okay.
So keep looking on YouTube, keep looking at my website. I speak to audiences all across North America, Australia, New Zealand, and countries beyond. And what a joy we have. We get to work with the best people on this planet, the people of agriculture. And I never, ever take that for granted.
Very good. Jolene, thank you for your time today.
You're so welcome.
Very good stuff there with Jolene, of course, a wealth of knowledge, very practical stuff. I found myself drawn into what she was saying, so much so that it was sometimes difficult to come up with a follow-up question because I was still pondering what she had to say. So very good stuff there. She was very, very good, delivered a lot of value, and I really appreciate her. Coming up next week on the Working Cows podcast, we will be talking to Daniel Hayes, and we're going to talk with Daniel about his journey with dogs. He has gotten into using stock dogs, and he's learned a lot and had really good mentors. And so we're going to talk to him about some of the things that he's been learning over this process and some of the ways he thinks about how to handle dogs and some of those things. So really looking forward to that conversation. Daniel's been a long time friend of the show. Probably one of the first people to support on Patreon, and has stuck with me through all these years. And so really appreciate his friendship. He had a great episode on the Ag State of Mind podcast that you could go listen to as well. Just Daniel's a really neat guy, and looking forward to this conversation with him coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.